Alright everyone, welcome back. I originally had this video planned for Tuesday, but then we had the news about the delay in content and the delay in the apparel event, along with the title update 14 patch notes, which actually covered part of the topic that I wanted to cover, and that was gear sets. But I also wanted to talk about unused talents and almost do like a gear sets versus unused talents based on a tweet from Trick Dempsey, which we'll get to. Now, I didn't expect any changes to gear from TU14 until the February content update, so it was actually quite a nice welcome surprise, and from what I can tell from testing and videos that I've seen on Strikers following the update, it's actually pretty good now. There is a bug on the crafting station where you can't find the Striker chest piece. It's actually missing, and because of that I've not actually been able to fully test it out myself. For some unknown reason, I don't have a Striker's chest piece, even though I've probably dismantled a million of them. Now today I want to talk about a tweet from Trick Dempsey, as I said before, regarding gear sets and underperforming or unused talents. Thankfully, it also confirms that we are getting multiple updates, which is great news as well. Drop a like if you enjoyed this one, a dislike if you didn't, and subscribe to stay up to date with all my videos. Let's begin. So firstly, if you missed the title update 14 patch notes, what's changed with Strikers? Well, Strikers will no longer lose stacks for missed shots, but the stack loss per second has been increased to 2, and this subtle change has actually had a huge difference and huge change on the gear set itself, and it's definitely way better than before. Now, I knew the devs were working on making changes to Strikers and other gear sets, but I didn't expect it this soon, to be honest. Trick Dempsey on December 13th actually tweeted that Striker was being worked on in response to a question from fellow content creator Coldboy. Coldboy actually reached out to Trick saying the following: any plans to buff unused talents in the upcoming update? To which Trick responded saying, we're focusing more on some of the gear sets than the underused talents. Striker's battle gear is getting the first update, but we're looking at more. The underperforming gear sets are doing the build game more harm than the lowest used talents. As usual, I want to say a huge thank you to Trick Dempsey for replying. She really has been a light in the dark, and I know the community really appreciates it. So the Strikers rework is just the start, and going off what they did with Strikers and how much better that set is now, I'd expect most gear sets to receive love, maybe even before the new content comes out, which is great. Now, I do want to preface the next part by saying that I rarely use gear sets. In fact, I don't have any loadouts with gear sets, and it's easily been a year or more since I last put a gear piece on, so I really don't know which ones are underperforming, and that's in stark contrast to Division 1, where the majority of my loadouts were based around gear sets, and I think that's just because gear sets in the Division 1 were, and I'll get to this, less restrictive and also way better. Trick obviously has access to a vast amount of data and internal testing, so I trust her when she says that the gear sets are doing the build game more harm than the lowest used talents. With all of that said, there are so many underperforming and unused talents in the game, I find it hard to believe that gear sets are a bigger problem. At the very least, I'd expect brand and talents to be on par with gear sets in their priorities, so I'm actually very surprised gear sets are getting love before brand talents are. In preparation for this video, and almost to try and kind of validate my concern here, I did put a poll out on this topic a couple of days ago, because sometimes numbers and data don't actually match kind of the community sentiment on things. This is actually a good example, albeit with a very small sample size. So in the poll I asked, are underused talents or underused gear sets more of a priority to fix? And as you can see, from 703 votes, talents take 64% of the votes, whilst gear sets take only 34%. That doesn't come as a surprise to me, in all honesty, and actually lines up with my feelings on this topic and why I wanted to make this video. You see, when I saw Trick's tweet, it didn't feel right. I mean, obviously I want gear sets to get the love they deserve, and in an ideal world I'd want both gear sets and underperforming talents to be fixed at the same time. But seeing as Massive do not have the manpower to do that, I would have expected and hoped they'd work on underperforming talents first. I mean, gear sets, as I said, is something I don't use, so the fact that gear sets were I knew they were underperforming, so they were always on my radar, but I never considered that they would be more of a priority. Now, aside from the general feeling that talents are more harmful to the game in their current form when compared to gear sets, which does marry up with the poll results, there's a couple of other reasons why I think they deserve the attention first. Number one is the loot pool. Right now, there are over 20 different brands. I think there are 46 different talents, and I think there are only 10 or so gear sets. This means that on average, brand sets are going to drop probably twice as often as gear sets do. And when they do, there is a good possibility they're going to drop with a talent that's either underperforming or simply just not used at all in the live game. Now, I counted at least 20 talents that I felt needed some love, with a handful absolutely useless in the game. What this does is dilute the loot pool with useless items, leading to many hours of frustration. Of course, we have the recalibration library to kind of help us swap talents, but that requires you to get the core attribute and attributes that you want first, which in of itself is a rare occurrence. And this is actually the main reason why I feel the brand talents are way more harmful than gear sets in the game. It is primarily to do with the loot pool and just how much it dilutes the loot pool with just unused, underperforming talents. Number two, gear sets require you to play a specific way in order to kind of achieve their potential. Brand talents don't really do that to the same extent, if at all. For example, I run a skill build most of the time, but because of the technician specialization, it means I can run an offensive core attribute in one of my slots, allowing me to have a little more weapon damage, but still giving me the benefit of those 6 skill tiers. In almost all of the gear sets, you really have to pick a specific core attribute and attributes in order to achieve the most potential out of that gear set. And I'd also say as well, and this is kind of off script here, guys, I'd also say, thinking about it, most gear set builds that I see don't use all of the pieces. Most of them use either just 5 or even just 4 of those pieces as well. Gear sets, they're a lot more restrictive intentionally, because the game requires you to play them to use in a certain way. Brand sets don't have that problem, which is why you will find most people who play the game on a regular basis will be using some kind of branded build rather than, say, a gear set build. Gear sets are required for primarily certain situations or certain missions, or if you need them for a kind of group composition. And because of their restrictive nature and because of the freedom branded talents and builds give you, fixing talents first, I think, would have the biggest positive impact on build diversity and the overall community sentiment around talents in this game. Like I said at the beginning, I'm very happy Trick is working on gear sets. From what people have told me, they absolutely do need some work, and the first change to Strikers appears to have been a success. I just wish talents had been given the love first, as I think, from my personal opinion and from what I've talked about in this video here, they are more important and they are more harmful to the game. And again, guys, that's just from my personal experience, and it's also based on obviously the poll that you guys completed. That will support me as well in that. I don't have access to all of the data, but data can sometimes just be that, just data. It really doesn't reflect on the real world experiences. And from my experience in the game, if I could use gear sets and if I felt that they were useful, then I would absolutely probably use them. But I just don't like the fact that they're so restrictive in this game. I would even say that in the Division 1 they were less restrictive than they are in this game. But I don't know, they're just not up to par. But I feel like talents really are really bad. There isn't many talents in this game that I see on the ground and I see them rolled on a piece of gear and I keep that piece of gear, because there really isn't that many that are good. Most of them are underperforming. I would say at least half are underperforming, and I would say at least 10 to 20% of them are really just useless. Now, what I will say, guys, is that when we get the specialization revamp, there may be some changes in there to the trees and some of the stuff added into those trees, whatever, that might make some of those talents become more powerful. But we don't know about that yet, so I'm just purely basing this on what we do know at this point. That's it for today, everyone. Thanks for watching. If you stuck around until the end, leave a comment down below. Let me know that you did. I'd really appreciate it. Also, make sure to turn on notifications, and that way you won't miss any of my videos. And until the next one, Epic out.